Mr. Whittleton? Mr. Trombley?
Here.
Okay, Ms. Polkin, you're here?
Yes.
And myself, so we have 3 members. So
Yeah, quorum.
we have a quorum. All right. Aaron, will you please do the public involvement announcements?
Of course, AMATS committee meetings are open to the public, and the public is invited an opportunity or provided an opportunity to comment at each meeting. Business items are presented by staff or consultants. After the presentation, the committee discusses the business item, and the public is invited to formally comment. Just as a reminder, each participant will have 3 minutes to speak on their topic, which we will make sure there's a nice buzzing noise. And then if you're joining us by phone, to mute and unmute the microphone, press *6. Thank you.
Very detailed.
Was somebody asking for somebody from the administration to attend the meeting and if so, please, hi.
Hey, Adam Trombley called in, so we have a.
Okay, we're good. Great. Thank you, so much.
Okay, so do we have an approval of the agenda?
Move to approve the agenda.
Would you approve? Adam, would you second that?
Yep, second.
Just a quick thing about the agenda. I do want to make a correction at the bottom for the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee on March 1st. It is actually 6:30 to 8:30 p.m., not 3:30 to 4 p.m.
Okay, so that would be the change to the agenda? Is that what we would want to call
We
that?
don't really need to.
Okay.
I'm just letting people know. It's on our website correctly. It just was an error.
Okay. All right. Do we have any substantive changes to the agenda? Okay, hearing none. Are there any objections to adopting the agenda? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. Okay. Agenda item 4, we have before us the minutes of the January 27th, 2022 meeting for approval. Do we have a motion?
Move to approve.
I'll second.
Okay. Moved by Mr. Trombley, seconded by Ms. Polkin. Okay, any changes or discussions? Okay, I do have one. You're already aware of this probably. Okay, and this is under item 4 of Chairman Young's committee comments. Incorrectly identifies Rabbit Creek Road for reconstruction. That should be the Seward Highway for reconstruction. So just that one change. Okay, any questions on that change, concerns, comments? Okay. So any objections to approving the minutes with the recommended changes? Tough crap. Okay, hearing none, the January 2022, January 27th, 2022 minutes are approved as amended. So, okay, let's roll into the action items. We have action item 5A, TIP amendment number 3, air quality conformity determination. Aaron, will you be providing some level of information?
Yes, I will. I'll be providing information on this, and then hopefully Matt Stitchick or Cindy High will be on to help if I misstep anything. So before you is the air quality conformity determination for TIP amendment number 3. So as you know, we periodically make updates to the TIP, either as admin mods or amendments, depending on the threshold of changes, which is established in our operating agreement. So if it's a substantial change that meets the threshold or above, we do an amendment, which is a greater level of change to the TIP. Amendments also require us to look at the changes and determine if there's an air quality conformity determination needed, whether they're going to be impacting negatively air quality within our area. So what you have before you is the air quality conformity determination for amendment number 3, because the changes being asked for in amendment number 3 meet that threshold for the determination. So basically, AMATS has to determine that future emissions from the transportation network remain under the allowable emissions budget established in the statewide implementation plan, or SIP, for air quality. So this determination was developed, thanks in part by Matt Stitchick, and then we had an interagency consultation review of this document, which involves FHWA, FTA, EPA, and state air quality, as well as AMATS, to review the document and give their yay or nay in the process that was used to develop the determination and if they support what the determination is saying. So that interagency consultation group met on February 9th, and they did give their support for the process that was used to develop the determination and to go ahead to release it for a 30-day public comment period. So that is what is being asked today by the policy committee. This was reviewed by the technical advisory committee, and they support the recommendation to release it for the 30-day public comment period. Just so you know, this will go hand in hand with the amendment itself. This one just has to be reviewed and approved first, and then we move to the amendment itself.
Thank you, Ray. Any questions or comments from the committee?
I appreciate the work that went into it.
All right, very good. Any questions or comments from the public on this action? No comments. Okay. All right. So what is the will of the committee?
Move to approve.
Mr. Trombley?
Second. Second.
Okay. Any objections to approving the motion? Hearing none, the motion is approved. Okay. On to action item 5B, tip amendment 3, tip tables. Aaron, again, we have.
So I'll go ahead and go over this one too. So this is the actual amendment or changes to the tip that's related to the air quality conformity determination. So I'm going to run pretty quickly through the memo to explain what we're changing. So table 2, we're making some adjustments to projects that are existing. So Spenard Road is needing an additional $2 million for design funding in FY22. So we're adding that in. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue extension, the funding shown in 2022 is actually being moved beyond 2022 because they do not need it at this point. Potter Drive rehabilitation is also moving funding to beyond 2022. And then we are moving the design funding that's shown for the TDM projects, the transportation demand management projects, to beyond 2022. We haven't even started the TDM study itself, so we're not at the point to be obligating funds to construct projects from that study. So we're recommending waiting until after that study is done. Next, we have table 4, plans and studies. We are adding some additional funding to the 92nd Avenue Extension Reconnaissance Study. You may recall the amendment number 6 that we had last month, I believe, extended the termini of this project to extend it from King Street to C Street. So now it's Old Sewer to C Street, so the entire length. And we were told that they need additional funding to help support that change. So we're recommending adding $150,000 from SRSA funding, which we have some available. So that's the COVID relief funding that AMATS has available. What's nice about this funding is that it's outside the AMATS allocation, so it will not impact fiscal constraint and does not require any additional match. Next is the congestion mitigation air quality. Because some money has been moved around, it freed up some money to move into 2 transit-related projects. The first is the bus stop facilities improvement. We're adding $1.5 million to that, and then we're adding about $4 million to the capital vehicles in FY22. So you can see total, we'll be giving them about $16.7 million for their projects this year. So we highly support transit and hope this gets approved. And then the next one, we have some changes from transit. These are railroad changes that we were sent. As you can see, they're increasing some of their funding in here, moving some funding around. We're required to show this in our tip, and because of the threshold of changes they're making, they do bump us into the amendment category as well. So they're included in here for your review. So staff is asking for a 30-day public comment period release on this to go hand in hand with the air quality conformity determination. And the technical advisory committee reviewed this amendment, and they support the recommendation to release for 30 days with no changes.
Okay.
That's it. Thank you.
Any questions or comments from the committee? Okay. Any questions or comments from the public? Shruti says no. Okay. So what is the will of the committee for this action? Adam, you
Move to
want to?
approve.
There you go.
Yep, move to approve.
Okay. Alrighty. Moved and seconded. Okay. Are there any objections to approving the motion? Okay, hearing none, the motion is approved. Let the record show Mr. Weddleton, who showed up at 1:41 p.m.
Certainly. We're all conspiring against it.
Just to catch up, we just finished action item 5A and 5B. So that was the air quality determination, the 30-day notice, and the tip amendment table, 30-day notification on approval. So we're on to 5C. Okay, action item 5C, MTP 2050 performance measures and project criteria. Back to you, Aaron.
Yes, it is. So this is actually my senior transportation planner hat I'm wearing as the project manager for this. So what's being brought forward to you today are performance measures and criteria related to the 2040 MTP. You may remember we recently did a comment period for goals and objectives for the MTP. We had a very good turnout. We had 600 comments provided to us by the public on that. We did actually make some changes to the goals and objectives that can be found on our website. You can see what the originals were and then what the actual changes are. They were pretty substantial. A lot of the comments we heard were actually related to the performance measures and criteria. So we carried those comments forward as kind of a starting point for developing what you see before you today. I'm going to kind of stop because I'm going to turn it over to the consultants that are on board. Juan, are you online?
I am.
Okay, it's up to you now.
All right, in the hot seat. Thanks, Aaron. Hi, everyone. I'm Juan Lee with R&M Consultants. I'm the consultant project manager for the AMATS 2050 MTP. Some of you may have attended our work session, our joint work session in January, end of January, that we had for the policy and the technical advisory committee on the performance measures and prioritization criteria. And I just want to say a couple things, and I'll turn it over to Ben Coleman, who is a staff planner with R&M working on the performance measures. And then Taryn Olsen-Yell is also here. She's going to make sure that any comments you have will be captured into a spreadsheet that we will include with the public comments as well. And that is the ask today after we're done, is that if we can release it for a 30-day public comment period. Anyways, the performance measures, like Aaron said, we received a lot of comments on the goals and objectives, and we wanted to make sure that the performance measures matched what the public was saying. And we've also included a lot of local performance measures that were not in the previous MTP. Previous MTP had mostly federal ones. And so when you're reviewing the tables, the highlighted items in blue are the local ones that we added that we're hoping to collect data on and measure to help inform the MTP policies as we move forward. Like the goals and objectives, the public really cares about this part of the plan. Because it informs what they really care about later, which is recommendations for projects. So with that, I will turn over to Ben. He's going to give you a brief high-level overview, and then we'll have time for your comments and questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Juan. I'm just going to share screen really quickly. We know if once that's visible.
Just going to interrupt you real quick. Would you let the record show that Chris Constance showed up at 1:43? Chris, are you there?
I am here.
Okay, great. So you're sitting in for Meg Zalatel today?
Yep.
Okay, and we are on action item 5C, Chris, if you have the agenda in front of you.
Thank you.
Okay, carry on. Thank you.
All right, so I recognize this is, for some of you, it's your third time seeing this, so I'm going to keep it pretty high level. At the same time, if anyone is kind of new to this content, the first time seeing it, I'm happy to answer questions and get into details. But with that, let's jump right in. Okay. So yeah, so as Juan said, there's sort of two kind of top tier categories. First, you have the federal measures. These are the ones in white, split between FHWA and FTA. Now these ones won't change, as opposed to the blue cells. These are the local measures. These are the ones that that we thought. So based on public comment and based on the goals and objectives that have been sort of set, when we asked ourselves, well, what hasn't fully been addressed, that's kind of where these local measures come in. In terms of setting a framework for how to think about them, and kind of my sort of encouragement as it hopefully moves forward into the public comment period, it'd be sort of asking, well, one, are these currently measured. The second one is if they're not measured, what are the staff and budgetary resources that would be required to collect it? And then the third question is really, is the juice worth the squeeze? Is the insight that we'll get from measuring these worth the cost to collect it? And so that's kind of that was sort of the guiding framework as we develop these and as we continue to refine them moving forward. So with that in mind, the first goal, in order to maintain existing infrastructure, the federal measures did a pretty good job at covering sort of general wear and tear based on a standard useful life. But then the question was, well, what about the factors that that can shorten that useful life, or that can accelerate that timeline? So things like natural hazards, for example. So the local additions were based on that. For goal 2, improving safety and security, again, fairly well covered by the federal measures. A few gaps or the need for nuance. One was looking specifically at emergency response times, and then looking at sort of intermodal conflicts as well. So fatalities or injuries between different modes. In goal 3, improving mobility options, the sort of big themes here were 1, incentivizing creative strategies and new technologies as a way to improve system performance. Another big one was giving people alternatives to driving and making those alternatives good. So one specific thing that came up a lot in the public comments that we definitely have paid attention to is looking at winter maintenance. So while that's not something that AMATS specifically deals with, it is something that we want to keep in the back of our mind, and whether it's through partnerships or finding some meaningful way to address that within this plan. And finally, there was the need to meaningfully address transportation and land use. And so I'm going to quickly highlight this right here. So context-sensitive solutions. This is an existing policy and an existing process that that the municipality currently uses. And the cool thing about this is that it already covers a lot of that. So it's looking at adjacent land use, but not just that. It's looking at some of these later goals, like promoting a healthy environment from the human and environmental sort of focus points, as well as down here in terms of equity. All of those are sort of wrapped up into the context-sensitive solutions process. And so this is something that sort of just directly touches on a lot. So the idea here is to capture the intent while ultimately letting the context inform how that intent is addressed. Next, we have goal 4, supporting the local economy. So the truck travel time reliability index, another federal measure that seemed to fit well here. At the same time, the local measures were addressing some of these gaps, such as looking at tourism or sort of general local investment in the community. Really, a lot of this touches on creating a sense of momentum. The idea that you sort of I'm trying to think how to word it. Giving what's the idea? So yeah, creating a sense of momentum and something to build off of in terms of creating a place that people want to visit and stay in and invest locally in. For goal 5, a lot of this, again, you'll see references to previous performance measures. And the reason for this is so promoting a healthy environment, both in terms of environmental protection and in terms of the human element of that. A lot of that comes down to kind of what we've already seen in goal 3, improving mobility options. So when you focus on providing and improving non-motorized infrastructure, for example, that has an impact on, for example, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and it also has the potential to improve health outcomes for residents. And then finally, we have advanced equity. So these are entirely local performance measures. The big thing here is we want to first be able to measure the disparities between sort of for example, low-income populations and the general public. Are we seeing a big gap? And what we've used specifically is the phrase EJ area of 60th or greater percentile. And you'll see that in a number of spots here. And that was used intentionally. The tip criteria, the tip scoring criteria currently uses this as a measure. And so we wanted to sort of reduce that logical gap while adequately addressing that particularly. And so that's what we have for the performance measures. Are there any questions here? And so if not, we can jump into the, I don't know if Aaron, I can't remember last time if we.
Hold on, Ben.
Yeah.
I think there's a question.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Thanks. So, one thing, so let's just look at the goal 6. So we've got objectives in white, and white is federal goals, or is that?
Pardon.
And then the blue,
Mhm.
so there's no federal, I mean, if I look at this, maybe we can explain the first column of objectives, but then the blue, so it seems like there would have been some federal goals for advancing equity. So
not in terms of the performance measures that are sort of established in law. So these are set entirely. Sorry, the goals and objectives. These were previously set by AMATS. So the policy committee. So you. This is for you to adopt for these pieces here. So these actual rows, for example. So looking at goal 5, where you have emissions reductions, whether it's I think so carbon monoxide and then PM10, so things like dust. So these are established federal measures, and these below are local. So slightly different than these columns over here.
I got that. I was just curious. I just assumed there were some federal goals for equity, because we have the environmental justice things and all that. And then one other small thing is.
Hold on, sorry, just a second.
Then on 1B3, incorporate nature-based solutions. What are some examples there?
Sure. So a big thing like that would be improving maybe like a larger like a greenbelt buffer, for example, and a big in terms of permeability. So for example, like where you have like concrete jungle kind of space, a lot of pavement. One of the big problems with that is, well, where does the water run off? So either that creates, stormwater runoff impacts unless you incorporate green solutions. So for example, if a project has the green belt, you're able to absorb more of the water kind of on site.
Okay, good. Thanks.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else for us?
Thank you. Okay, Ben, do you want to go on the criteria?
Yep, let's do it. All right, and so for the criteria, let's see. Yeah, so the big thing here is there are 3 different sets of different types of projects. This is largely based on funding. So for example, you'll have transit-only projects, and these will be scored against other transit-only projects based on those funding sources. Same thing for bike and ped projects. If there's specific types of projects, and that way it creates sort of an apples-to-apples comparison between those projects. And then you have the complete streets, and this is kind of what you think of like your standard corridor project that may include bike and ped and transit elements as well. So there's apples to apples between the types of projects. And then what we've done is we've given even scoring between the different goals. And so you have goal 1, goal 2, goal 3. Again, with everything, we're trying to tie everything specifically back to the goals, create a really solid linkage there. And so each goal has the same scoring. And so what this does is it creates, this allows transferability in scoring between the different types of projects as well. And so that's sort of the general format. So for example, let's say if you have a bike and ped specific project, you're going to ignore these columns when they're being scored and you would focus specifically on this column and kind of run down through each goal until you arrive at your final score. Does anyone have any comments on sort of how that works or any of the specific information in here? We did get some comments previously during the work session and then again during the TAC meeting, looking at different things like how to connect with land use. And one of the things that we discussed is that there are a number of options sort of moving forward, whether we add bonuses, create penalties, or even adjust sort of weighting and scoring. So those are all options to kind of create to I guess sort of refine how you want to look at projects in the context of the goals that you're trying to further. At the same time, this is meant to be very high level, sort of getting a better sense of the projects that will never work because they, directly fly in the face of the goals you're trying to further, versus projects that, are pretty good, and this creates a way for them to, to maybe be enhanced before they're submitted for initial review. Any questions, comments? All right, I think we covered it all.
Okay, thank you, Juan and Ben, for doing that. Just really quickly, so we are asking for both to be released for a 30-day public comment period. The Technical Advisory Committee did review the documents. They had some changes that they wanted to recommend, but we recommended that they submit those during the public comment period itself to give staff time to be able to review those changes and see what kind of effects they have on the performance measures. Often committee members ask us, hey, what about this, what about that? On the complicated issues like this, we need some more time to be able to research it. So I would also recommend this committee to submit your comments unless there's something drastic that needs to be changed during the public comment period so that we can have time to review it and see its effect on the overall process. Thank you, that's all I have. Could I ask a question?
You say this committee, so as individuals we would do it, or do you want the committee to come up with some declaration?
As the policy committee itself.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions from the board? Okay, any comments or questions from the public? All right, so what is the will of the committee?
Move to approve.
Move to send out for public comment.
Okay, so we have enough names there. We have a move in a second. So, okay, any objections to approve the motion? Hearing none, the motion is approved. Thank you, Juan and Ben.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Last action item, item 5D, Northern Lights sidewalk project. Aaron, talk to us about that.
Yes, okay, so really quickly, so what's before you, our TIP has 2 pavement replacement pots of funding that we utilize, one for roadway and a recent one that we added with this TIP for non-motorized facilities, so pavement, pathways, trails, that kind of stuff. Because we recognize that we have a lot of facilities in our area that need pavement replacement just like roadways. So it's been a very successful program for us this year. We've done 8 projects from it, 8 to 10 projects from it, and then 18 from the roadway. So it's pretty good for our first year. We're anticipating continuing. One such project that came out of the non-motorized pavement replacement is Northern Lights Boulevard, Minnesota Drive to Seward Highway. DOT was looking at this project and determined that it's a pretty expensive project for pavement replacement, the typical type that we normally include in our program in that pot of funding. So they came to AMATS asking, what to do with that. They did a presentation a couple of months ago to the policy committee, and they're following up to see what kind of action was to be taken. After looking at everything, staff is making the recommendation that this project, the Northern Lights Boulevard, Minnesota Drive to Seward Highway sidewalk repairs, be pulled out of the pavement replacement and included as a separate standalone project in the 2023 to 2026 TIP. This will allow it to be fully funded to do the ADA improvements that are needed, to move the utilities out of the way, and everything else that's in there. The memo that from DOT kind of outlines all of the need. It looks like it's going to be a $4 to $5 million plus project. The estimate they have right now is a planning level estimate, so it'll probably increase as time goes on, but we'll keep an eye on that. This was reviewed by the Technical Advisory Committee and they supported this action. And so it's being brought for you today for your guys' action.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Any questions or comments? Mr. World.
So we had reviews of this project and it was going. So the dollar amount that, do you ever recommend dollars? Is it, I mean, one option was just one side, what was the other? What are we looking at here, the full blown project?
Yeah, we're recommending fully funding it at the $5 million that they show in the memo.
I have a question.
Hold on a sec, Chris, Mr. Trump.
Yes, this is the one that the first AMATS meeting was only $800,000 a pro. Okay, all right, I remember this. I asked the questions like, how does this make it this far? Okay.
Yeah. Mr. Constance, do you have a question?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So if this is programmed into the 2023 to 2026 tip, does this mean the construction horizon is really 2026? Are we talking a 4-year delay?
I don't know how to answer that. Is somebody from DOT in the room or online who could answer that?
Mr. Boland.
Boland, DOT. I don't have a schedule established based on the scope that we're talking about here, expanding it from 800,000, which obviously is very constrained. So I can get back with you on where this project would be expected to be delivered.
So, Mr.
Yeah, as long as I lived in Anchorage, people have been complaining about trying to navigate the sidewalks of Northern Lights. And so 4 more years seems like a lot of pain, but it would be nice to have a little more insight.
Yeah, you know, my guess is, Chris, that we'll probably be able to do the project development piece on the front end, and that the money we're talking about really is the phase 4 construction funding for this thing. With the number of right-of-way actions that were involved in this project and the utility agreements and relocations, I think if we can keep moving forward on it now, I think you'll be able to reasonably see construction in that 23 to 25 timeline.
So does that mean that the 800,000 that's programmed can go towards the design, the initial phases?
That's correct. Yeah.
So this is in lieu of that.
Yeah,
Right.
that's what that 800,000 really is for, is the design efforts, and they realize they're gonna need a lot more if they wanna fully fund everything that's wanting to be done. So that's what's being asked here, is separate it out and then specify the right-of-way amount and the construction utilities amounts and when that's gonna be happening.
Okay,
it's
as
not
long as
a
we're
delay.
not delaying the 800,000 to the 5 million, and then we'll start then. I think that's reasonable.
Done. Yeah.
Sorry.
So we are just putting this project out there, but it's being studied. I mean, it could be the right-of-way acquisitions are so much and so burdensome to the businesses that would not happen. That's a possibility, right?
No. In the world of authority and necessity to do these Americans with Disability Act improvements, I think we have sufficient authority and necessity to do right-of-way acquisition as needed. But typically, the impacts to the adjacent property owners are fairly, their approach, driveway changes and sidewalk changes, they're not necessarily taking out parking areas that would reduce the parking availability to not an acceptable standard.
Because sometimes you just take a couple feet, now you've thrown up all the parking and they lose the whole tier of parking.
Well, and like Chris said, that Northern Lights, those sidewalks are very narrow and very challenged. Lots of big power poles right in the middle of the sidewalk, so there's a lot of work to do. Yeah. I think it needs to be done. If you look at Benson, kind of in contrast, which was created much later, and how much width and space you have there, it's a whole different.
I'm familiar with the thing. I walk it occasionally, and I did it with Kevin Jackson once. It was very enlightening.
And there's some challenges there. You got the old Matniska Dairy thing that's just right up against the sidewalk there. How do you deal with that? So there's some challenges there. But in the grand scheme of things, I think 5 million is a reason for that level of utility relocation effort. It's good cost. Any other questions on the project?
Not a question, Mr. Chair, but I would comment that there is a comment in the chat that should probably be read since the chat doesn't carry forward with the record.
Okay. Shooty, will you read the comment for us?
Sure, public comment from Lindsay. We've had a discussion at the BPAC, Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee, But the Northern Lights project should go beyond just pavement replacement and made fully ADA compliant. I'm glad to see that this recommendation has come forward. We also agree there should be a lane reduction, which would take much longer, but want to share that I support this change for progress in the meantime.
All right. So we'll just assume that's a policy committee referred public comment. And are there any more committee comments?
Just one question. Sometimes in private development, we require developers to bury power lines. Would this be a requirement in this project as we move utility poles?
I thought they had said they would look at undergrounding utilities where possible, but that all has to be kind of looked at as they further move into the project.
Okay, so it would be looked at, it wouldn't be
It will be looked at. The utilities collect an undergrounding fee. If you look on your electric utility, you get, and they aggregate that fee. And I don't know how they plan out the phasing of those undergrounding options, but that's something we could coordinate with the utilities on to see if that possibility would exist.
Okay.
Oftentimes, they don't like to underground the transmission mains. They're okay with undergrounding the distribution.
Oh, okay.
So Chugach Electric gets a little persnickety with undergrounding.
I wasn't clear on that. I didn't know there was a differentiation between the two.
Yeah.
I mean, why would I? So I was just asking a question. Okay.
Good question. Any other questions or comments from the committee? Hearing none. Any questions or comments from the public on this, other than the one that you just read? No questions or comments from the public. Okay. Then what is the will of the committee?
Move to approve.
Second.
Seconded. Any objections to approving the motion? Hearing none, we are now approved the motion. Okay. Aaron, any other action items we need to talk about?
No other action items.
Okay. All right, moving on to agenda item 6A, highway safety corridors within an urban environment. Aaron, will you presenting in less than 10 minutes?
I will actually be passing this over to Scott Thomas. Scott Thomas, are you there?
Yes.
Awesome. Go ahead. He'll have a quick presentation to give you guys on this information. Thank you, Scott.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Scott Thomas. I'm DOT Traffic Engineer, Central Region, and I'm back on your question on urban arterial safety. You might recall we met on this question specific to Tudor Road in December 2020. I've got 10 slides, 10 minutes or less, and we'll try to keep your time. Today's question, we talked in the past about all the things we could do, up to 10 solutions to arterials, but today's question is really, does AMATS, which is the city and the state agencies, does AMATS support or object to implementing urban safety corridors as a kind of interim treatment? And I'll give you an outline of the next steps that are possible, and you can think about that. We've worked on a lot of other things you can see, and in the upper right, since we last met in December 2020, the non-motorized plan has come out, and the good news is it's very much in the state is in agreement on the safety criteria, the safety rankings, the needs, and this should enable federal highway safety improvement program funding, more funding to come to non-motorized needs in Anchorage. So why consider urban safety corridors? And I've clarified a few things since we last met a few weeks ago, but it's a tool. Do we want to use that tool in Anchorage? It works for a time. It's been used to date on rural highways. You've seen them on the Seward Highway, Goose Bay, Parks Highway, Sterling Highway. Those roads as a whole saw a serious injury and fatality decrease of almost half, over 40% as a whole. And what drops our numbers down is the Seward Highway is really difficult on Turnagain Arm, and we have not seen a fatality decrease on the Seward Highway. But in general, they worked for a time, and then we try to find ways to make it permanent. And that's what DOT is doing on the rural corridors. Most of them are getting divided highway and working with the side streets to have better access. So is it something we can do now? I'll tell you that just recently, the Assembly passed a resolution that said there's support for identifying urban safety corridors on state roads. I reread this, and it's actually specific to state roads. And through a data-driven process like Highway Safety Improvement Program identification, and it appears to authorize the city traffic section and police department to work with that. So I would say that we're authorized to do that, urban safety corridors, through this resolution. And then I would say that we want to clear that up is number one, are we allowed to do it in the city of Anchorage? And the state statute, which I will shorten here, I've underlined that it says that we can do this on state roads, working through the commissioners of DOT and the Department of Public Safety, working with the local government. It's a data-driven method, but under the state statute, it's so far the statute and the assembly resolution point to state roads. And there's things we may want to clear up through AMATS and through the city is what about city arterials? Are all the methods in place to deal with fines and grants going back to safety efforts per the state statute? So there could be a little clarification. But I'll just say that we appear to be authorized to do it now, and we should do it with local support before we do it. So as we work towards next steps, what I would say is that the Anchorage Municipal Code already does enable or recognize safety corridors, and there's a few ambiguities in city code and state code. It says that a safety zone is a pedestrian exclusive zone. But it also says a safety zone is a traffic safety corridor. And just like a work zone and a school zone, we use the term safety zone, and we might be a little confused with pedestrian exclusive areas. We might want to reword this. And I've actually got some suggested wording that I could share with the city that they could look over that might make things a little clearer. So this is something that could be worked on if it was to go urban. One of the other big steps in order to allow urban safety corridors is a technical step. The state and the city update the federal manual for traffic control devices, and that manual right now restricts safety corridors to rural roads. That could be worked on. It's something we could start now as agencies, and we've already been talking about doing is enabling this to go into urban. Just delete the word rural and redefine the length of the corridor. So I expect this process to start anytime, and but we should have local support before we really finalize this. This kind of change has to go to the Federal Highway Administration, and it affects all boroughs and all cities. We all follow the same manual. What I want to show you is that having the code and the statute and the technical criteria is good, and then the effort of actually choosing urban safety corridors is a data-driven method, same as rural corridors. And the good news is we all see the same problems. So we're recognizing the same roads through data analysis. We've done it through AMATS processes and plans before, and we're seeing the roads you expect: Tudor, Muldoon, Gamble, but some city roads too, downtown, 3rd Avenue and Lake Otis Parkway. So if there's going to be urban safety corridors, all the legislation right now and code enables state roads, not city roads. Maybe that should change. Another data-driven way that we look at things is when we set speed limits, we look at more than crashes. We look at adjacent land use, pedestrian bike activity, transit activity, access, density, and as well as motorist speeds. But speed limits aren't decided by speeds alone. And we're finding the same roads we find high crashes on that I just mentioned, and Muldoon and Tudor and Lake Otis Parkway, a city road. And then, of course, in Midtown as well. I don't have them all highlighted here. We're going to have another meeting with the city traffic department and Anchorage Police Department this next month in mid-March to go over what steps we can take with or without safety corridors. What are the next steps on some of these high crash areas? So only a couple more slides. Why consider urban safety corridors or safety zones? They're a way to lower the speed behavior of motorists, not necessarily the speed limit. In other states that have safety corridors, usually the speed limit doesn't change, but it can. And hopefully the result is lower crashes, just like rural highways. I will tell you that if I just lower the speed limit, what I usually find is then everybody is ready to be ticketed. Everybody is a problem. But most drivers out of that pool, there's some outliers who are disregarding it today. They're worth ticketing today. And I think if we just lower the number, it has not much effect unless it comes with a safety corridor. once you do that, then I think most people are reasonable and law abiding, and they will comply better. And then those outliers will become more obvious and be easier to ticket. So I think there's been a lot of question about, can we lower a speed limit in a certain area of concern? And I would say not very well without a safety corridor. So this is the last slide. What is the process to get urban safety corridors? Number one was confirm that state roads are authorized. That was a question just a couple weeks ago, but the more I read the Assembly resolution and the Alaska statute, it looks like they're already authorized. Is it very clear if you get into ticketing? I would say that Anchorage Municipal Code, I would recommend clarifying the term safety zone and pedestrian exclusive areas. And I have suggestions for that for the city. Number three is it really can't happen unless we update our technical criteria. That process can start now, but it would help if we had some support from the city, some written support that said, or AMATS that said, yes, please start that. And then once everything's in place on the left, the regulations are clear and we're going to change the manual and it's adopted, then getting them started goes through some words that I'll just close by saying there's some official terms. It's data driven. We need a study of candidates so that we're getting the right roads that need it the most. Then you can't just call it, there's an action plan or an implementation plan. What are we going to do for education, media, enforcement? What steps are we going to take? Are they reasonable? If we can put that plan on paper, then it's given to the chiefs of our departments to actually make it official. It's not staff that does this. It's the commissioner of DOT, the mayor, the city manager. It's the municipal traffic engineer. They have to sign off that we have an actual set of steps we can take. Number 7 is we have to perform those steps once it's designated and approved. We have to go out and actually put that action into place. And then what really makes them effective is we check back every year under number 8 and do an audit and make sure we're following the plan. And that just keeps us on track. And then I'll just close with, we're never done unless we find a way to decommission them. We usually fund permanent solutions because after a decade or more, attention wanes and then we have other spots to go to. So I would recommend that we find and fund solutions to make them more permanent. Changes in the road, changes in other roads, take the pressure off. So I'll close with that. I wanted to leave time for discussion. And so back to you, Aaron. I'll do that.
Do you have a question for Mr. Constant? Just as a heads up.
Mr. Constance, did you have a question?
Yeah, I don't see a link to this on the agenda like the other documents. So is this available somewhere? The slide deck?
Yes. I've given these slides to Aaron and they're available. Yes.
Thanks, Aaron. Would you just make sure I get a copy?
We emailed them out a couple of weeks ago, so I'll find that email and resend it.
Thank you very much.
And Chris, since you're substituting for Meg Salatel, she was the one that originally requested this, so it's your responsibility to tell her all about it. It's not really a question.
Yeah, no, some of it speaks plainly and loudly. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, Scott, thanks for the presentation. And I think probably Chris and Meg and I would be happy to work with you on fine tuning some of that language as well as I'm sure traffic engineer. And I just noticed I was reading the downtown plan and comments from DOT on it said, look at doing a safety corridor downtown. So it seems like this is not a totally fresh idea. I see Brad's there. Work with Brad on it. So anyway, just to let you know, the ideas may actually be in one of our plans eventually.
Any other comments or questions? Committee?
Just a point of clarification. These are updated slides and so we want to send out updated clarifications since they've last been seen.
All right, thanks, Scott. Any questions from the public?
Somebody had their hand raised earlier. Did they have a question? They can unmute and speak.
Okay. Hearing no questions for the comment. Scott, thank you very much for your presentation. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Okay. Aaron, any project plans or updates that we need to talk about?
Yes, I had one more that was not on the agenda, but I wanted to sneak in really quickly. Just a reminder that the Seward to Glen PEL comment period closes February 28th. So if you have comments, get them in as soon as you can. Thank you.
So if there's no other general information, we're going to move on to item 8, committee comments. Any committee comments at all? General information? Good to know stuff. From DOT, just real quick, couple quick things. APD submitted a request to discontinue the continuous lighting curfew along C Street corridor pursuant to some fatalities down along between 36 and Tudor with all the hotel development down there. We reevaluated the continuous lighting curfew rationale and the cost savings behind that with the implementation of all the LED programs that we've instituted. The cost savings are much less now than they used to be for lighting curfews for us. In addition to that, the new development along those corridors is fairly significant, all the hotels and things on C Street. So we reviewed the entire program region-wide. There was Minnesota, C Street, and the Sterling Highway down in Soldotna that fell under lighting curfews. All of those lighting curfews have now been discontinued as a result of the police chief's request. So that's a good news story. So we'll have some full lighting all the time on the streets, Mr. Wells.
Okay, so continuous, you mean time, hours?
24,
not-
well, whenever it's dark, the lights are going to be on. I think we had them turned off between 1 a.m. and, Scott, do you remember? Are you still there? 1 a.m. and 5 p.m.?
Yes, that's about right.
Okay,
So the curve on Minnesota, are those LEDs now?
everything's LED. We're still implementing a few LED timing systems now, but for the most part, that program not only has been almost fully implemented, but has completely paid for the cost of the program through the savings, cost savings.
But they were off between 1 and 5 a.m.
They were. Now
I'm
they
embarrassed to
are,
say I've noticed that they were off often. I must be getting home.
you need to get home earlier.
On the topic of lights and darkness, I would put note, since DOT is here, the C Street Bridge over to Government Hill continues to operate at less than half capacity of its lighting.
I appreciate that, Chris. I'll let our M&O folks know.
Thank you.
Okay, other comments? We did manage to hire a new maintenance and operations chief. His name is Kirk Warren. We stole him from Alaska Energy Authority. So I want to go work for Curtis there now. He has a vacancy. And we will take possession of Mr. Warren on 7 March. Also, just for COVID-related issues, we're recalling all employees back to work for DOT March 14th. The governor actually stood down on his initiatives back in mid-January, but we extended it due to the fairly high numbers that were present in January. But it looks like numbers are coming down fairly quickly recently. So after spring break, we're asking to go back to normal working conditions. Just for your awareness. Okay, any public comments? Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. And meeting is adjourned 2:25 p.m.